All right, well, I'm joined with one of my inspirations, Malcolm Gladwell. I'm so excited that you came into our Trend Hunter office.
Delighted to be here.
I just thought we could play a more obscure intro and just ask, what is Malcolm Gladwell?
What is Malcolm Gladwell? Malcolm is a curious person. That's why I'm a journalist, writer, just because that's an excuse to pursue whatever interests you. I mean, not every job has that same freedom. So
Sure.
I think if that's the simplest answer I can give to that question.
And why do you think you're so curious? Does it date back? I know you've got a Jamaican mother who is a psychologist and an English father that is a mathematician. I thought that's an interesting combo. Did that inspire you, or what are the earliest memories you have?
Yeah, I mean, it must be. I'm an immigrant twice over. I have parents who come from very, very different cultural worlds. So I suppose I've always been a little bit of an outsider. And when you're an outsider, you have the freedom to, lots of things are novel to an outsider.
Sure.
And now I'm a Canadian in America, and I am in the same position. I always think of curiosity as not so much a trait as a situation. You put yourself in situations where questions occur to you. I'm less enamored of the notion that some people are inherently curious and others are not. I mean, my accountant might be a very curious person,
Sure.
but he's not in a job that invites curiosity. In fact, we don't want him to be curious. We want him to be by the book, and to So, I'm someone who has been in a curious position for much of my life.
And a lot of that speaks to journalism, but even within that, what are the things that you would do to foster your curiosity or ensure that you're always pulling that thread of the sweater?
Yeah. Well, I try to, a lot of it is about exposing yourself to things that will potentially prove your preconceptions wrong. So I make a very conscious effort to challenge what I believe. Nothing makes me happier than when I change my mind.
Do you think that over time there are a couple points when you remember your mind being significantly changed, things that have altered the course of your life or destiny?
Yes. The first time I went as a child, we would return to my mother's homeland, Jamaica. The first visit I made to Jamaica when I was old enough to know what was going on. And just the notion of being exposed to a completely different country and different culture and different ways of doing things and different weather and understanding that difference was not just normal, but part of my family heritage. That's sort of a really interesting, mind-blowing notion that you can be a person who has an English father and Jamaican mother. It makes sense. I mean, it's
Sure.
not a kind of, and sort of observing the way ever since then, I think I continue to be completely fascinated by the ways in which culture shapes people. And I think that's probably from one of those first eye-opening visits.
I'm really fascinated by the sort of drive that you have to counter your assumptions, and I guess it comes out in your study of the oddballs, the underdogs. How else do you think a person could put themselves in that position?
A lot of it has to do with delaying how quickly you respond to some piece of information. So as opposed to jumping to a conclusion of something you hear, waiting. It's as simple as, here's a really prosaic example. You go to a restaurant and you don't like it. You should go back. Because one time is not enough. And there's a million reasons why you might not like it, and you might not be aware of them. And maybe the restaurant just had a bad day, or maybe you ordered the wrong thing on the menu. I mean, there's a whole long list of reasons, as opposed to jumping to this global conclusion, I don't like it. Why not just go back, see if it's still true?
There must be something that keeps them running, right?
Yeah, but that's that idea of delaying. A lot of what in my perspective, open-minded or really creative people do is they wait. They're not making sort of instantaneous judgments about where they want to go or they're exposing themselves to something, and they're kind of thinking about it. Even if they're not consciously thinking about it, they think about it, and suddenly the idea that seemed bizarre and stupid with a little bit of reflection and time, they say, oh, wait a minute, actually buried in that is this really interesting idea. And it may take a week or a month or 6 months to see that. And I think we spend a little bit too much time privileging people's instincts in those moments, and not enough time understanding that innovative people are super thoughtful. They're taking the time to go back over their experiences and sift through them for meaning, you know?
And all related to this, how do you look at the study of ideas? Why is it important to study social psychology and where we're headed?
Because ideas are our kind of operating instructions. I'm writing a book right now that's about how we deal with strangers. What are our operating rules for dealing with people we don't know? And it's pretty clear to me that we have a set of rules, of ideas about the way someone else's mind operates. And those ideas are not present at birth, they are acquired, culturally acquired. And sometimes those ideas are wrong. And the reason you study ideas is to figure out which ones are useful and which ones are lousy, because they matter. If you understand statistics, you think about economics or health or any number of things in a profoundly different way than if you don't. There's a case of an idea, once you're exposed to a set of concepts, you use them in ways you may even not be aware of, and they shape the way you understand the world. So I think of these, I don't think of the study of ideas as trivial. I think of it as, ideas are the software we use to kind of navigate everyday experience. Nothing could be more important than that.
We spend a lot of time at our Future Festival trying to help people think about the world 5 years out, even 10 years out, and the human brain's not really engineered for that. And in your discussion on the 10,000 hours, you sort of talk about how even in the beginning for yourself, you didn't know that you're a writer. 10 years later, you're the expert, and you can see that in the journey. What are your thoughts on how people should think of the future when you're still at that first hour of the 10,000 or embarking on a journey?
Well, the real lesson of the 10,000 hours idea is not the particular significance of that number, which is a relatively arbitrary number. It is the notion that expertise unfolds more slowly than we believe. So the point of using that number is that it takes longer than you think to get good. I am struck similarly when I think about the way that changes happen in society, we have an expectation our world is really fast moving. I don't think it is. I think it's really slow moving. I'm always struck by how long it takes us to kind of wrap our minds around the significance of an innovation. The ATM was introduced in the late 60s. The late 60s. In the 80s, I was still going to the bank to get my money because neither I wanted to use an ATM nor had the bank figured out that it would be useful. 20 years with something that seems like so totally, completely straightforward. I mean, these things take time to mature.
When people go to look at these new ideas or technologies, whatever it might be, what do you think the main mistakes are, other than slowness, of sort of seeing where the world is headed?
I think the principal mistake we make when we think about the future is we underestimate the power of technology to transform, to solve problems, and we overestimate the potential of human beings to solve problems. So if a problem is fundamentally a human problem, it's going to be a lot harder and take a lot longer to solve it. If it's fundamentally a technical problem, then we always think it takes 10 years, it actually takes 5 years. The reliance on fossil fuels, I sort of feel like that is so not a problem. We're going to fix that. It's just a technical problem. A bunch of smart people are going to figure it out, and we're going to all be driving electric cars in 5 years. I mean, I don't have any, but a kind of problem that requires human beings to work together, to solve their differences, that's something that I would say is going to take longer than we expect. So that's a really crude way of dividing up things, but if you go back and look at people's projections about the future from 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, it strikes me they're they're often way too conservative in their estimations of technological change and way too optimistic about our ability to bring about world peace.
Well, what other final advice do you have for people who want to innovate or understand where the future is headed?
Yeah. The part about innovation that always fascinates me is the interdisciplinary jumps. So the future never, or change in any kind of broadly understood way, never advances, if it's meaningful, in only one domain or field at once. In some way, ideas get reflected in multiple different places simultaneously, whether that's by deliberate transmission or just kind of the ideas in the air. So there's a wonderful literature about innovation that simply looks at how many times was an invention invented in more than one place simultaneously. And the answer is by two people who are not talking to each other. The answer is all the time. Two people who weren't talking to each other invented the telephone at the same time. I mean, the list is like this long. But that's also true across fields, that people start playing with ideas at the same time in many different places. And I think the one really, really useful, when you look for patterns, that's why you look across disciplines, not deep. Because if you could see it reflected in many different places at once, then you realize something profound is going on. That notion of kind of interdisciplinary connectedness is, to me, that's the kind of secret sauce of understanding trends and things.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because the way Trend Hunter has been structured from the beginning is explicitly to show people other industries.
That's why I said, it's like, it seems like that's so consistent with what you're doing. That's why I was struck by it.
And what actually excites us most about Future Festivals, you bring people that are from technology and fashion and design, and you collide them together to solve the world's problems.
Yeah.
So, so I'm excited to have you be part of Future Festival.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to it. Hi, I'm Malcolm Gladwell. I've been writing about the future for 25 years now, and I can't wait to see you all at Future Festival.